Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study of the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Job chapter 32. Now, in a spectacular twist, um, Job has concluded making his case. Another, if you go back and you remember what we said that um, in the beginning of the book of Job, we have, chapters 1 and 2. So we have the heavenly scene, followed by, Satan presenting himself before with the sons of God. And then he goes and he destroys Job's life. In chapter 3, you remember, we have 3 of Job's friends who show up. They travel. They sit with him for 7 days, and then after hearing Job's first talk, they just, in a dramatic form, turned on Job. And as I said, thus far, what we have been seeing is I think, a kind of an insight into human nature from this perspective. That you have a lot of people saying things that they don't know anything about. That there is a lot of people saying things about God that they don't know anything about. That they shouldn't be saying anything about. That they're giving their views and opinions. And if you did not know better, for example, if we did not have chapters 1 and 2, then how would we view that? Like when we look at tragedies in people's life, how do we view that? How do we take that? It's horrible, to see someone suffer, to see when adversity strikes. And sometimes you have with people maybe one horrific adversity or tragedy that hits them. But then you have sometimes people that may have a whole series of adversities that hit them. And of course, Job is one of those. And what we don't see, and what we did not, well, first and foremost, what we have from the book of Job, we have the revelation that God has given us, meaning the inside look. So we know what happened to Job because God gave us the revelation. Now, outside of that, in most cases, we don't have that revelation. So why did this happen? Now, and I'm saying this because it is foolish to interject what you think might have happened. And that's been the problem in human nature. Well, and sometimes, if you even think about this, we feel sometimes even with guilt that this is happening because I must have done something. I must have, instead of, well, life happened. When you ask the question, sometimes life just happens, right? And we should not interject anything into a circumstances that we don't know. If you stop and think about this, why did a person die of cancer? Now, here's the thing. Well, we don't know, other than they died of cancer. Now, of course, we want to go deeper than that. We could say, well, why did God allow cancer to ravish our loved one. And again, we don't always have that answer. And one of the things that we have to understand is sometimes we assume God didn't do something to prevent it, right? For example, how many of us ignore what is going on in our bodies? Think about that. So, in one respect, God created our bodies, right? God created our bodies to kind of warn us when things go wrong. How many times do we ignore that? Let's go before. What about our eating habits? Now, I'm just using this as an example. What about our eating habits? You know, I dealt with prostate cancer, and the thought, why me, right? Because as I told you, whenever you are going through something, you certainly feel like you're alone. You feel like you're stranded alone on an island while the rest of the world is going on. Well, the question is that why would this happen? And again, so I'm so again, we can't answer these questions, but just think about this now. I'm thinking about my case. Was it my diet? Because I ate a lot of junk food, right? How about not going to the doctor? And I say that specifically for me because I have health care. You know, so at the time of the diagnosis, I think I hadn't been to the doctor maybe in a couple of years. How many times we think that by not going to the doctor, that all of a sudden whatever's going on in our body is just going to go away. Now, I'm using this just as an example because sometimes when we ask the question, well, of course, in Job's case, now I'm going to say this. So now you have people who want to interject their wisdom or lack thereof. And again, and that's where the foolishness comes. So Job's friends, for whatever reason, for whatever kind of thought they had, they turned on Job after hearing him one time. Basically said, we and it started off and this was the starting off nice. Where they said we can't we can't believe you strengthen the hand of the poor, you help the poor, you been a guide and an outstanding citizen, and you help people who were afflicted themselves, and now when it happens to you, you fall apart. And then it gets worse from there. And basically, they were just basically trying to get Job to say, Job admitted, you done something wrong. You did something evil. You were evil. You were sinful. And Job was like, no, 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 I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. No, 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 I didn't do anything wrong. I did everything right. And yet trouble came to me. Now, I want to get into what switches here. Well, let me, before I go, so the switch now is that at some point, another young man comes into the picture. We don't know when he arrives. As best that we can see, remember this discourse takes place, well, really kind of over the course of a week, 7 days. Or they put it like this. Job's friends, having heard about his adversity, they come, they see the devastation, they sit for 7 days, and then they begin the discourse. Okay, now, as best we can tell, that this whole discourse probably took place within the same day. And if we were to kind of spread it out in that, we've been on this now for several weeks, but, well, actually several days, but if you spread it out, we probably can do this discourse a couple of hours, 3 hours max, right? So at some point, this young man comes into the play. And basically, when he comes into play, he is going to be, his name is Elihu, and basically he's going to be like a John the Baptist. And what you have to kind of understand about John the Baptist and the role of John the Baptist was that he was a forerunner to prepare the hearts, to prepare the way. Let me kind of, I want to explain him for a little more. Because his response is a lot longer than I thought, so we'll probably be on his response a couple of sessions, a couple of studies here, so that's why I'm not in a rush to go through this. Elihu's response is going to be, in a sense, now, in olden times, when you would have the king, now, they didn't have roads the way that we have roads, right? Pavements. So at best, you would have, in places, dirt roads. Probably more common, ruts or just grass. Advanced men would go out and they would clear the way, to clear the path of debris for the kings. Okay. John the Baptist was, he said, he was this advanced person to prepare the hearts of the people before the Lord. Jesus would say about John the Baptist that he was one of the greatest, he was the greatest prophet of the Old Testament. And that's a kind of a wonderful story in itself. One of the ways is because he prepared the hearts of the people. Elihu is sort of like that. He's going to prepare the heart because God is going to speak, but then Elihu comes along. Elihu, he comes along and he's actually going to challenge Job and his friends, right? And he is going to speak with wisdom. Now, another thing about this is that in these times, elderly men were always, of course, esteemed as men of wisdom, and that you respected. You would respect that. Respect the elders, right? Elihu was going to mention that. He comes, we don't know when he arrives, but then he is going to speak. So, now, chapter 32 verse 1 says, so these men quit answering Job. Now, remember, Job just had this long, his last defense. So these men quit answering Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. Now, the narrator, whoever wrote the book, we don't know who the author of Job was. But he's answering this. There's a couple of ways you can look at this statement. That Job was righteous in his own eyes. And I say that only because God will rebuke him for that. And then also the fact that this is how they assess Job. They remember they just spent over 10 times going back and forth with Job. So it said that these three men quit answering Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. So one lesson here is don't argue with somebody who is stuck on their ways. Verse 2. Then Elihu, son of Barachel, the Buzite, from the family of Ram, became angry. Now, of course, we don't know who this family is. Apparently, someone who was reading this way back then knew, is that he became angry. He was angry at Job because he had justified himself rather than God. He was also angry at Job's three friends because they had failed to refute him and yet had condemned him. Now I got to stop and say this because, as I said, this is kind of a great lead up to this. First of all, he was angry at Job because he said he justified himself rather than God. And we saw that as the discussion went on, and especially in the last study we saw where Job said, man, if I could talk to God, I would demand of God, show me where I'm wrong. Tell me, God. Well, God, like I say, he's going to do that. But notice he said he was angry at Job's three friends because they had failed to refute him. And I want you to underline that. They had failed to refute him and yet condemned him. When Job would reply to them, they had no answer. Now, I can tell you, I'm not a scholar. And oftentimes when I tackle issues, especially kind of on the channel here, if you go on the channel, you will see tackle many channels. One of the things that I will ask, like whoever believes something, like whatever belief, whatever theology, and there are many, and I'm not afraid to tackle them. But I do find that there is a common thread. One of the common things that you will find is that people will have an argument, but and they will be stuck on that argument. So like I deal with Calvinism. I'm doing a whole series now unpacking Calvinism. And then there are people that will come and say, well, you believe your belief about Calvinism. One, they tell me that you don't understand Calvinism, or you don't understand the people, or you're not, they would, whatever, make their argument. What I'm saying is, I find that this is so true with people, that people, watch this, will fail to refute, but yet still condemn, and that is so true. In other words, they were unmovable. Job's friends were unmovable. And such, especially when it comes to theology, especially when it comes to theology. Now, I'll read verse 4. I'll probably come back next time in the next study and read this. It says, now Elihu had waited to speak to Job because they were all older than he. So that's again, he's going to tell why, but pretty much the assumption was that older men had more wisdom. He said, but when he saw that the three men could not answer Job, he became angry. Now that's the other thing. So at some point he comes in, he doesn't say anything. So all this time, at some point he comes in, he listens. He's sitting back there and he's watching, he's listening to the conversation. And so now he's going to speak. And I'm going to come out of this because I'm not going to get into it today. But his point, and he's going to bring out that, and again, what we're going to see is for a young man. Now, one other thing too about this, what they considered young, he could have been 40 years old. And in some cases, you wasn't necessarily kind of mature until you were 50 and older. But he is going to speak with wisdom for a person that young. Which kind of brings up too, can young people have wisdom? The answer is absolutely. The common thing is that they don't. They have knowledge, but they don't have wisdom. All right, guys, I'm going to pick up, like I say, I'm going to pick up with this in the next study. Just kind of an introduction here into this fascinating young man named Elihu. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, added to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next study.